I bought my first piece of land when I was 23. It was nothing impressive, just a small, sloping plot of raw land tucked between two hills near Lake Valence. There was no road, no utilities, and the lake wasn't even visible unless you climbed a tree. But it was mine. And more importantly, it was the first real step I'd taken toward building the life I wanted. Back then, I was making around $35,000 a year as a junior draftsman. I lived on black coffee, gas station sandwiches, and the kind of resolve that comes when everyone in your life thinks you're chasing a dream that will eat you alive. My parents were the loudest critics. "Why would you waste what little money you have on dirt?" my dad had said. "That land's a swamp." Mom was more subtle. "Sweetheart, you're just not practical. Maybe it would be smarter to rent something nice in the city, close to work, and maybe start saving for a wedding someday." But I wasn't interested in nice or practical. I had a vision. I wanted to build something from scratch, not just a house, but a place that represented every year I spent pushing back against the ordinary life they always tried to box me into. So I worked. Nights, weekends, holidays. I took on side gigs and freelanced wherever I could. And every spare dollar I had went into that land. Over time, it stopped being a patch of trees and mud. I installed a septic tank myself, ran power with help from a friend who worked with a utility company, and built a gravel path wide enough for a car. Then came the foundation. A-frame walls, windows I bought secondhand, a roof that nearly killed me when I slipped on it during a frost. It took 12 years. 12 years of scraped knuckles, frozen mornings, canceled vacations, and missed birthdays. I poured in nearly $450,000 by the end. Not just money, but every part of me. But the day I sat in the living room of my finished lake house, watching the sun rise over the water through the giant window, I framed myself. I knew it was all worth it. My life didn't look like anyone else's, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Then, a few months ago, I came back from a business trip and my house was gone. Not literally demolished, but gone. Sold. Strangers were living in it. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. I drove down the gravel path like I always did, expecting to find the warm, cedar-framed home I'd built. Instead, there was a shiny new mailbox out front with the name Dempsey on it. There was a dog barking behind a fence I hadn't installed, flower beds I never planted, and a woman in her 40s on the porch, looking at me like I was a lunatic. "Can I help you?" she asked, holding her phone like she was ready to dial 911. I live here," I stammered, still gripping my keys. "This is my house." "No," she said carefully. "We bought this property in March. From your parents." My heart dropped into my stomach. I drove off before she could call the police on me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I drove to my parents' house and sat in my car across the street, staring at the warm yellow light in their kitchen like it belonged to strangers. I kept hearing her words. "We bought this property in March. From your parents." The next morning, I walked in unannounced. My dad was at the table eating toast like nothing had happened. My mom was in the living room watching a true crime documentary. "You sold my house," I said. My mom didn't even look up. "You mean that wooden cabin?" "It was time. You haven't been using it much anyway." I froze. "You didn't have the right. That land is mine. My name is on the deed." Dad shrugged. "It was under the family trust. We had power of attorney. Everything's legal." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. I had signed that stupid power of attorney years ago when my dad convinced me it would streamline things in case of emergencies. I was 24. I didn't know any better. I demanded to see the paperwork, the sale documents, anything. That's when my mom handed me a manila envelope like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Before you embarrass yourself," she said coldly, "we did this for your brother." I stared at her. "What?" "Eli needs help. He's been trying to launch his startup for years, and he finally has a team, a plan, a real shot. But he needed capital. And you," she motioned toward me like I was a broken appliance. "You've always wasted money on meaningless things. We needed that money to secure his future." I should mention something here. Eli is 7 years younger than me. The golden child. Every time he dropped out of something, college, a coding boot camp, a music career, my parents said he was exploring his path. Meanwhile, I was expected to quietly build a stable life and never make waves. But this? Selling my home behind my back. I stared at the forged signature on the paperwork. They even used my old address from 6 years ago to file it, so I wouldn't get notified. I looked up at my mother and whispered, "You actually believe this was meaningless?" "It was a pile of wood next to a lake," she said. "Eli is trying to change the world." And right then, I couldn't help it. I smiled. Because the house they sold wasn't the only thing I'd been building for 12 years. It wasn't even the most valuable. And they had no idea what they just walked into. I left my parents' house that morning with shaky hands and a quiet, burning fire in my chest. The kind that doesn't flare up. It simmers, slowly and deliberately. I didn't scream, didn't argue. I just walked out, clutching that manila envelope full of lies and betrayal, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Angela Vega had handled my LLC paperwork and property disputes before. She wasn't flashy, but she was sharp, and more importantly, she knew how to pick apart fraud like a hawk dissecting prey. I slid the forged documents across her desk, pointed to the power of attorney, and said one word. "Fix it." She flipped through everything in silence, pausing only to squint at my signature. "This is a pretty lazy forgery," she said. "They didn't even get the slant right. And this date format? That's not how you write your sevens." She looked up. "You never gave them an updated power of attorney?" "No," I said. "They used the one from 2009. Angela raised her eyebrows. "The one your dad convinced you to sign when you had the flu and were on cold meds." I nodded. She leaned back in her chair, took a breath, and said, "This is going to be messy, but I think we can blow the whole thing up." She wasn't wrong. Over the next few weeks, Angela filed to freeze the proceeds of the sale, launched a formal investigation into the forged signature, and initiated proceedings to challenge the validity of the sale. The buyers, Mr. and Mrs. Dempsey, were furious, but sympathetic once they realized they'd been caught in the middle of a family war. They had bought the house fair and square, but with fraudulent paperwork involved, their ownership was on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, I started preparing my other hand. Because here's what my parents didn't know. The lake house wasn't the only thing I'd built on that land. About 5 years into the project, I'd bought the adjacent parcel, half an acre with no lake access, nothing but trees and rocks. Nobody wanted it, but I saw potential. It was technically zoned for mixed-use development, and over time, I slowly converted it into something special. At first, it was just a small steel building with no windows and a roll-up door. Then I added security systems, hidden wiring, solar panels, biometric locks. Inside, I built climate-controlled storage units, a microserver farm, a workshop, and eventually, a space I jokingly called the vault. That space held the actual treasure, the intellectual property for a proprietary drafting algorithm I had spent years perfecting. A software solution that had caught the interest of 2 architecture firms and 1 private military contractor. I hadn't sold it yet, but the NDAs, interest letters, and encrypted prototypes were all stored there. It was worth more than the lake house by a long shot. Probably millions. And here's the best part. When my parents sold the house, they only included the main parcel, not the adjacent one. They thought they were gutting me, but they missed the heart of the operation. Angela helped me lock down the adjacent lot under a shell company I controlled. I quietly reinforced the perimeter, moved most of the contents to an off-site server, and set up monitoring. My parents still had no idea that the real gold mine was the ugly, windowless shed they left untouched because they thought it was just storage. A week later, I met my brother, Eli, at a downtown cafe. He was wearing a new leather jacket and had that energetic, twitchy look he always got when he thought he was winning. "Hey," he said, grinning like a kid who just got away with stealing candy. "Heard you stopped by the house. Sorry about the confusion. But listen, I really think you'll be proud of what I'm doing." "Proud?" I said, sipping my coffee. "You stole from me." He waved it off. "It's not personal. It's just investment. I'm launching a platform that'll connect sustainable brands with investors. It's a win-win. People like you build things, people like me sell them. And what do you do when there's nothing left to sell?" Eli smirked. "Come on. You spent 12 years building a lake cabin. You gonna tell me that's more important than helping me launch a platform that could help thousands of people?" I didn't say anything. He took my silence as agreement. "You'll come around," he said. "Mom and Dad just wanted to help. Besides, you're the one who always says you're self-made, right? You'll bounce back." I nodded slowly, keeping my smile to myself. "Yeah, I will." The next big crack came when the buyer's title insurance company pulled out. Thanks to Angela's filing, The Dempseys were now demanding a full refund from my parents or they'd sue for damages. The money my parents received, most of which they gave to Eli, was frozen in escrow. The startup money? Gone. Their accounts? Locked. Eli? Panicking. That's when Mom called. She didn't yell or plead. She just said, "You're tearing this family apart." I let the silence stretch before replying. "You did that the day you forged my signature." "You're being vindictive," she said. "No, I'm being precise." There was a pause. Then she asked, "What do you want?" "I want you to stand in court and tell the judge what you did. I want you to admit, on record, that you forged legal documents and sold something that didn't belong to you." Her voice cracked. "You'd really do that to your own mother?" I didn't respond. Because the truth was, I didn't have to. Angela called 2 days later. She sounded amused. "They want to settle." "What kind of terms?" I asked. "They'll transfer everything back, repay legal fees, publicly withdraw the claim of power of attorney. In exchange, you drop criminal charges." I hesitated. "And the Dempseys?" "They're already in talks to purchase the property again, from you this time, at a higher price. Looks like they love the place." So I agreed. We drew up papers, filed the settlement, and 2 weeks later, the house was mine again. For 48 hours. Then I sold it. To the Dempseys. For $620,000. And that wasn't even the best part. Because just as I finalized the sale, I received a call from a private buyer overseas. He wanted exclusive licensing rights to my drafting algorithm. The offer? $3.1 million. That night, I stood on the ridge above the lake, looking down at the lights glowing from the house I had once built with my hands. A house that was no longer mine. And I felt nothing but peace. Because finally, I had built something they could never take from me. And they had no idea what was coming next. 2 months after selling the lake house and licensing my algorithm, I disappeared, at least from my family's radar. I moved 3 states away, bought a modest but sleek house in a gated community under my LLC's name, and paid cash. No loans, no debt, no traceable mortgage. I didn't tell anyone my address. I changed my phone number. I even started using a new last name for business dealings, my grandmother's maiden name. The only people who knew where I was were Angela and the buyers of the software, who wired my payment through 3 separate law firms to avoid any visibility. I wasn't hiding because I was scared. I was hiding because I was free. But you know how freedom works. Someone always wants to drag you back, especially when they've got nothing left. The first sign came through email. Eli had somehow found my new business address and sent a long, rambling message titled, "We should talk." It was full of buzzwords, fake humility, and desperate hope. "Look, I get that you're still mad, but I'm working on something big. We could partner. I know we're stronger together than apart." Delete. The second was my father's voice, leaving a voicemail on a number I'd only given to clients. "Your mother hasn't been herself. You've made your point. Can't you just come home for dinner? We'll talk like adults." Delete. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Angela sent me a package. Inside was a thick envelope marked confidential, filled with bank statements, transaction histories, and, most interestingly, court filings. My parents had taken out a second mortgage on their home to pay off Eli's failed startup debts. When that wasn't enough, they liquidated their retirement savings. But it still wasn't enough. Eli was being sued by 3 former business partners who claimed he misrepresented funds, falsified projections, and ran off with their investment. And now, with the Dempsey lawsuit settlement officially recorded, their reputation was trash. No bank would touch them. So naturally, they were coming for me. But not with lawyers. No. They were coming with guilt. It started with a chance encounter. I was walking through a boutique home goods store in the middle of the city, one of those places that sells overpriced minimalist furniture to people with time and money. And suddenly, there she was. My mother. Hair dyed darker, thinner than I remembered, but unmistakable. She saw me, and I froze. She didn't scream. She didn't even smile. She just said, "You've lost weight." I didn't reply. She stepped closer, eyes flicking around like she was afraid of being overheard. "Can we talk? Please. Just 10 minutes. I should have walked away. But part of me was curious. So I nodded toward the cafe across the street. We sat down, and for the first 5 minutes, she just looked at me like she was trying to remember who I used to be. "You were such a sweet boy," she said finally. "Quiet. Creative. Never wanted anything too fancy." "I'm not a boy anymore," I said. She looked down. We never meant to hurt you. I gave her a flat look. You forged my name and sold my life's work. We thought we were helping Eli. We thought you'd bounce back. There it was again. The phrase, you'll bounce back. As if my life was a trampoline designed for other people to jump on. She reached into her purse and slid a photo across the table. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, smiling with missing front teeth and crayon stains on her shirt. Her name's Ivy, she said. Eli's daughter. Your niece. I blinked. He's a mess, my mother continued. But she's innocent. She didn't choose any of this. And she needs stability. We all do. I stared at the photo. Ivy looked happy, untouched by all this chaos. Then my mother leaned in and whispered, we're going to lose the house. I was wondering if you could help. There it was. Not forgiveness. Not ownership of what they did. Not a real apology. Just the same old playbook. You're strong. We're weak. Save us again. I slid the photo back and said, that's not my family. Her mouth tightened. How can you be so cold? I smiled. Because I finally understand what warmth costs. I walked away. But that moment stayed with me. For days, I thought about Ivy. Not because I felt guilty, but because I understood her. A child caught in the gravitational pull of people who never learned consequences. I thought about who she might become. Whether she'd grow up being told what to sacrifice and who to save. Whether she'd be told that her dreams were impractical. That someone else's needs always came first. Then I made a decision. I called Angela. I want to set up a trust, I said. For Ivy. Not her father. Not my parents. Just her. Angela paused. Are you sure? That could get messy. I don't want her to ever know where it came from. Anonymous donor. No access until she's 21. Set it up however you want. Just make sure she never ends up like the rest of them. She nodded. You're a better man than they deserve. I didn't feel like a good man. I felt like someone building fireproof walls. Still, it helped. For a while. Until the letter came. Typed and signed, but obviously from my father. You can keep pretending you're above us, but you're not. You're one of us. You think your money protects you? It won't. Family is forever. Even when you want it dead. I read it once. Then twice. And then I started laughing. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something. They didn't want me back. They wanted to control me. But I was no longer the boy who brought them blueprints and hoped they'd be proud. I was the man who built something they couldn't reach. And soon, I was going to build something even bigger, something they wouldn't even see coming. A year passed. I had almost forgotten what my mother's voice sounded like, what Eli's stupid smirk looked like, what it felt like to be treated like an afterthought in my own family. The peace was unnerving at first, but I got used to it. The software licensing deal had matured into something far greater than I expected. After a successful rollout in Eastern Europe, the algorithm was picked up by a Scandinavian firm, then white-labeled by 2 U.S. government contractors. I wasn't just making money, I was building leverage. Influence. I still lived modestly. No sports cars, no flashy trips, no mansion. Just quiet moves. Strategic investments. A portfolio of commercial properties under shell companies. And a brand new company, this time not under my name but run through a trust one created to protect it. I called it Ores and Structures, a nod to the idea of prayer, but with steel and glass. But despite everything, one thing still felt unfinished. My family thought they'd gotten away with everything. Sure, they were sued. Sure, they had to return the money. But they still went on like it had been a misunderstanding. They still told their friends a version of the story that painted them as concerned parents who were trying to help their son see reason. Then came the chance I didn't know I was waiting for. Angela, my lawyer, called me out of the blue. You're not going to believe this, she said. Your brother just applied for a business grant. So? He used your lake house as part of his personal background story. He's trying to paint himself as a survivor. Said his selfish brother destroyed the family after years of hoarding resources. There's even a quote, he abandoned us when we needed him most. We tried to guide him, but he chose greed. I didn't even feel angry. I felt curious. So I reached out. Not to Eli, but to the grant committee. Through Ores and Structures, I arranged a quiet sponsorship of the same program. And under a different name, I requested a full review of Eli's application. It didn't take much digging for the truth to come out. He had lied about previous business failures, concealed his involvement in the Dempsey lawsuit, and even forged a letter of recommendation from a former mentor. His application was not only rejected, it was flagged for potential legal action. That's when he called me. I didn't answer. He left 7 voicemails. The last one broke something in him. I know what you did. You're sick. You think this makes you better than us? You'll die alone, man. You're so bitter you don't even know how to let go. What kind of brother ruins his own family just to prove a point? I replayed that one twice, then deleted them all. Because here's the thing Eli never understood. This wasn't revenge. This was repair. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I was trying to remove the infection. And the longer I stayed connected to them, the more I risked becoming the same bitter, manipulative, self-centered person they tried to turn me into. The final nail came in the form of a letter from my mother. Real ink. Shaky handwriting. No threats this time. Just a quiet paragraph that said, "We're selling the house. We can't afford it anymore. Your father's health is declining. Eli barely speaks to us. I know you won't answer, but I wanted you to know. I'm sorry. We failed you. We lied. We stole. We didn't understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope Ivy grows up knowing someone in this family had integrity." I folded the letter and placed it in the safe where I keep all my old blueprints. I never replied. Ivy, now 9, receives quarterly deposits into her trust. She thinks they're from a scholarship foundation. She writes thank you notes to a name I made up. Mr. Soren, the imaginary philanthropist. Her handwriting is crooked and beautiful. She wants to be an engineer. She says she likes fixing things. I hope she never has to know what it feels like to be broken. Sometimes I drive past the lake. The Dempseys still live there. They added a second story to the house and built a dock. It doesn't look like my house anymore. But that's fine. It served its purpose. Because in the end, it wasn't just a cabin. It wasn't even a symbol. It was the seed of something I built with my own hands, despite them. And when they stole it, they thought they'd buried me. But really, they planted me.